What's going on, guys? Jason here, and I am back with the penultimate historical deck profile. Today's deck is going to be the deck that came first at the Poland National Championships in 2006. The way I came across this list was I was browsing eBay for some Duel Masters auctions, and eventually when you're scrounging around for deals, you manage to strike up a conversation with the seller. So the eBay seller was mleko 1993. Well, basically, I was just asking him for some cards, and he's like, "You have a full list of cards." And oh, by the way, I actually won nationals in my country nearly 10 years ago. Would you like would you like my deck list? And I'm like, "Yeah, hell yeah, why not?" So yeah, this is the list that he gave me, and for just by looking at it, it sort of makes sense. So I'm just gonna take his word for it. So here we go, Polish Nationals 2006. Based on the cards that he has included in his list, I'm willing to hazard a guess that this was up until DM12, just because it includes Farzi the Oracle, DM12 being Thrash of the hybrid mega creatures. He plays 48 cards, and it's a 4-civ control deck. Plays Fire, Light, Water, and Darkness. No Phal, however. Starting off, we've got Two Bloody Skeeto, a classic darkness blocker. He's pretty important, as we've talked about, not only for stopping rush rather, but also to block Gonta the Warrior Savage, who is now available in the card pool. You can trade with Gonta, so that's what makes him very reliable. Next up, we have the finisher of the deck, Bolmedius Steel Dragon, 7 mana, 7k double breaker. When he breaks a shield, those go into the graveyard, meaning no shield triggers, please. We also have 2 Emerald. When you put this creature into the battle zone, you may add a card from your hand to your shields face down, and then grab one of your shields. So that's how we plant our shield triggers. Unsurprisingly, we do not have space for the Merfolk engine, and you'll also notice we aren't playing any copies of Coral, or rather, mleko over here is not playing any copies of Coral. First, new card. I don't think we've covered this card in the past at all. We have Estel, Vizier of Aqua. Once he hits the battle zone, add the top card of your deck to your shields face down, then look at one of your opponent's shields. Naturally, the second effect isn't so hot, but I think we mainly use him, for his first effect. Fire, darkness, and water on their own do not have any form of shield recovery, so I think that is the main purpose why we are using light in this list. I'm pretty sure it's so that we can accommodate Estel. Next up, we've got 2 copies of Forbos Sanctum Guardian Q, who's a survivor. That's not really relevant, but his effect reads, when you put this creature into the battle zone, search your deck, grab a spell, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. So he's basically Logic Cube. As far as survivors go, the power mana ratio is actually pretty good. It's 6 mana and 4,000 power, so I guess this sort of replaces Phal Iga. I guess this is a more proactive deck as opposed to reactive. Phal Iga, you just play your spells out, and then you play Phal, you get them back. Whereas with this, you just play Forbos, and you're like, I need this spell for this particular situation, and that is the route that I am going to go. More of the creatures, we have 2 Gigabalza. It's basically Locomotiver. I don't know why he's opted to play 2 Gigabalza, 1 Locomotiver. My OCD is killing me, but that's just how it is. So 1 Loco right there. We also have 2 Farzi the Oracle. When this creature is destroyed, you may return a spell from your graveyard to your hand. So I guess this is his form of spell recovery because he doesn't play Phal Iga. It's curious. I guess he opted to play a split of 2-2 between Forbos and Farzi rather than like 4 Phal Igas or something. I think Farzi's a pretty good card. Gives this deck some good early game. And yeah, can't really complain about him. I'm always happy to see him. Before we wrap things up, let's just take a look at 3 Pyrofighter Magnus. Actually, no, 2 Pyrofighter Magnus. What am I talking about? Speed attacker at the end of your turn. He returns to your hand. I suppose Pyro is just there to help you close out games or help with some early game control. Like if your opponent thinks that they can start swinging, you just go boom, Pyro. So there you go. Another way of looking at him is a reusable Phantom Dragon's Flame, in a sense. We've also got 4 Sarius, Vizier of Suppression, 2 mana, 3k vanilla blocker. Alright. Wow. So, as we can see already, this deck is teched out. We aren't really No, we really aren't. Well, outside of Sarius, we're not playing max copies of any cards, so that's very interesting. He's decided to give up elements of consistency in favor of versatility. I think that, well, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these cards do, in a way, add a consistency boost. Like, for example, Forbos, you grab the spells when you want them. Emerald, you put your shield triggers down, but you're not going to be able to hit them every game. So I guess it's a very flexible deck. Alright, anyway, we've got one copy of Apocalypse Vice. Destroy any number of your opponent's creatures that have total power 8k or less. As we've talked about, this is one of the most powerful spells in the game. I guess he can afford to only play one copy because he's going to use Forbos to retrieve it. If it's not in his deck, he's got Emerald to fish it out of his shields. And, you know, if he's already used it or if he's discarded it by accident, that's where Farzi comes in. I do like the synergy between Apocalypse Vice and Forbos just because of how, you know, how much they cost. So you could just play Forbos turn 6 and then turn 7 you play Forbos, you grab your Apocalypse Vice, and then on turn 7 you just charge and play it down. Also, we have one copy of Blizzard of Spears. Destroy all creatures that have power 4k or less. Pretty useful, I guess, as you get rid of the blockers. Again, with Gonta in the format, that makes Blizzard of Spears that much more valuable. We've also got two copies of Brain Serum. Shield Trigger, draw 2 cards, costs 4 mana, so 1 more than Energy Stream. Curiously enough, he does choose to play both. So he plays 2 Brain Serum and 2 Energy Stream. I personally would just prefer 3 copies of Energy Stream. Sorry, 4 copies of Energy Stream. But I think, I think what he was going for was he wants to be able to be cute with Emerald. That's the only thing I can really think of. Anyway, we also have 2 copies of Burst Shot. Destroy all creatures that have power 2k or less. Makes sense. It's a shield trigger. Very good to play defensively. Offensively, it's kind of just like a weaker Blizzard of Spears, I guess. But sometimes it is better to play Burst Shot so you don't get rid of some of your guys like, you know, Forbos over here. Next up, we've got 2 copies of Cranium Clamp. Your opponent chooses and discards 2 cards from his hand. Another one of the best spells in the game. 2 copies seems fine because we're also playing, you know, 1 copy of Lost Soul, and we do have ways to fish it out of the deck and retrieve it between Farzi and Forbos. First time I'm reviewing. Oh, actually, before I go on to that, I also should mention that we do have 2 copies of Crystal Memory. Search your deck for any card and, you know, just grab it. Another great shield trigger, and I think that's what helps add consistency to these decks that don't play Illusionary Merfolk. Why bother trying to draw into the cards that you want when you can just search for them? Next up, we've got Fists of Forever. First time reviewing a card like this. Choose one of your creatures in the battle zone. Whenever that creature wins a battle, untap it. So Fists of Forever is okay, I guess. In his personal message to me, what he mentioned was Fists of Forever combos well with Bolmedius. So what you could do, I guess, is if your opponent has blockers, you can just play Fists of Forever, you swing with Bolmedius, and then if he tries to block it, you can just untap Bolmedius, and then you can just attack again. So that's the main combination we're going for here. It's not necessarily integral to the key main strategy of the deck, so that's why we only have 1 copy. And, you know, another reason why we can only afford to have 1 copy is because he plays 2 copies of Flood Valve, no Thrash Crawlers as you will see, very cheap Flood Valve, 2 mana, but same effect as Thrash Crawler except in spell form. So if you find you charge something a little too early or you need something that happens to be in your mana zone a little bit later, just grab it with a Flood Valve. 1 copy of Grinning Hunger. So a lot of these cards I'm actually covering for the first time, which I think is really awesome, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you guys this deck profile. So Grinning Hunger, 4 mana. Your opponent chooses one of his creatures in the battle zone or one of his fields and puts it into his graveyard. So I personally think Grinning Hunger is really good if your opponent doesn't have any creatures on the field. Usually he'll just choose one of his crappy creatures. So in that sense, letting your opponent choose doesn't net you a huge advantage. I think the real devastation comes when your opponent doesn't have any creatures to choose, so he has to get rid of one of his shields. 1 copy, which I guess is fine. There are ways to retrieve it, but I think that one of the main things that is very appealing about Grinning Hunger is you're able to recycle it. And at 4 mana, that's actually not so bad. If you think about it, we have some very cheap forms of creature removal. We've got 2 Phantom Dragon's Flame, so, you know, it's basically Crimson Hammer. That only costs 3 mana, so you could play maybe like Phantom Dragon's Flame to get rid of something, and then just play Grinning Hunger a bit later into the game, or you could just Spiral Gate into Grinning Hunger, so I think that's really good too. Now, speaking of Spiral Gate, choose 1 creature in the battle zone and return it to its owner's hand. So that's pretty good because, you know, as I've mentioned time and time again, Spiral Gate's a very flexible card. You can use it offensively, you can use it defensively, you can use it to combo, you can use it to bounce some really big creatures. It's just good, period, and I am glad to see a control deck is finally deciding to play it. Next of all, we've got 2 Holio. What would a light deck be without Holio? Tap all of your opponent's creatures in the battle zone. That's normally there to save your butt. You can use it offensively, I guess. This deck doesn't have too many super powerful creatures, but you never know. Bolmedius is the strongest creature this deck has. We also have 3 Terrapit, Shield Trigger, kill one of your opponent's creatures. He's not playing max copies of Terrapit. Not quite sure why. Maybe he figures he wants to keep the card count low. Maybe in his testing 3 was enough, but also let us remind ourselves we are able to play Farzi to get it back. And actually, now that I think about it, it does make a pretty good combination with Farzi and Emerald. Like, imagine being able to recover Terrapit with Farzi and then just plant it with Emerald. Another thing you can do is you could maybe Forbos for Terrapit and then plant it with Emerald. I think that's pretty neat. But yeah, I mean, Terrapit, pretty basic inclusion, really. Bit surprised he isn't playing 4, but no, I guess that was his call to make. Next up, we've got 1 copy of Zombie Carnival. 5 costs, so a little bit hefty, but Shield Trigger, choose a race, return up to 3 creatures of that race from your graveyard to your hand. So the main reason we are playing Zombie Carnival, I believe, is because we want to be able to get back our initiates. Sarius and Estel are both initiates. Perhaps that is the main purpose. But again, you know, this 2-1 split confuses me because that means you basically make your Zombie Carnival weaker. I know it's not that often that you're going to be recovering 3 of the same card with Zombie Carnival, but, you know, the option is there. Yeah, so that's a little bit curious to me. I'm not quite sure why Zombie Carnival in particular. So yeah, that's the deck. Very interesting deck. I quite like it in terms of distribution by cost. Look at that. When was the last time you saw a control deck which had nearly a third of its cards cost 2 mana? I think that's pretty good. Not too heavy in the 3 mana section. Some key cards missing like Aqua Hulkus, but that's okay. In 4 mana section, yeah, that looks pretty standard. 5 is looking a bit thin because we don't have Coral, but again, you know, that's fine. 6 looks pretty standard, and yeah. So changes. I don't really have much experience with this sort of deck just because it is a fairly unconventional build. What I would do first of all is I would replace either 2 Gigabalza with Loco or 1 Loco with another Gigabalza, obviously. I think that's if you want to play Zombie Carnival, it just makes more sense. Alternatively, I might actually just replace Zombie Carnival entirely with Morbid Medicine. So Morbid Medicine is a spell that came out in the last or second to the last set. 4 mana double Dark Reversal, basically. No Shield Trigger effect, unfortunately, but I think you're going to get a lot more flexibility out of Morbid Medicine in comparison to, you know, this. Or I guess maybe what he's doing with Zombie Carnival is he's trying to, like, get rid of all of Sarius's early, and you can play it Zombie Carnival late game for a big plus. Another thing is I might replace the Brain Serums for Energy Streams. I think being able to draw cards on turn 3 is pretty important, considering we do not see any Aqua Hulkus over here. That's right. Me describing Aqua Hulkus's effect was not present in this video. Probably the first and last time that's going to be the case. But yeah, no Aqua Hulkus. Other than that, I think this is fine. Maybe I would try to squeeze in another copy of Grinning Hunger. I think that's a pretty neat card, especially with the Spiral Gates. Or I'd also try to squeeze in another copy of Terrapit and maybe another copy of Spiral Gate as well. Distribution is very good. He's playing near equal counts on all of the cards. If you find Light and Water is a little lacking, he's got the multi-civs and Estel to balance that out. So yeah. Other than that, in terms of blockers, I think he could have also included Tajamal. I think Tajamal is pretty good. Maybe replace 2 copies of Sarius with 2 Tajamals or something. But that's just the way it goes. So yeah, very interesting deck. I know I've said so yes several times as if I were concluding something, but this is the conclusion for real. Very interesting deck by mleko, and I do want to give him my thanks for sharing his deck list with me. It's not something that I've been able to try out myself, but the only changes that I would be looking to make were things that could help smooth it out a little bit. Overall, a pretty interesting deck, and if you guys do manage to try it for yourselves, I'd love to know what your findings are. As always, I very much appreciate you watching my videos. I hope you enjoyed or learned something new, and I'll see you guys later for the last historical deck profile.